Brilliant.
Look at the camera though. Ready to rumble.
I recommend
The West operates with impunity. We've got war criminals that just get away with it, get loads of money, and just still stay in power, or influence around the world, and nothing happens.
Hi, welcome to the Brilliant Podcast
Hi.
with Harvey. Hi.
Ready? Wow!
Hey, welcome to the Brilliant Podcast.
With your hosts, Harvey and Maria. On this episode, we'll be speaking with a close friend of mine who I've known for many years. He's one of the smartest guys I know. He's a master's in mathematics. He's worked in financial crime. He's my good friend Lloyd. We want to explore some stuff that I think is really relevant to kind of the world and everybody at the moment, because it is something that, whether we want to, face the reality or not, is something that's going to affect us. And this is the situation that's happening in Ukraine. With the way things are escalating and growing, I feel like it's our duty to speak out about it and kind of say our piece.
With care, with love, of course. And we do, this is from our heart, and this is the purpose to create and, to connect with each other.
How's life in Scotland?
Yeah, good, man. Bit isolated, but at the same time good. Get to spend time with my dog. My parents had a good time, helping them finish off some renovations. So that's nearly done. Cleared up the place. We've planted over 300 trees now, so that should be good.
Wow.
Planning on planting a few more. I want to get.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, well, it's
awesome.
we live very far north, so it was hard to get them to grow, but now we've got a good foothold. There you go. We planted
Which kind of trees?
150 last Christmas. I think another 150 this Christmas. Go from there, trying to make it Eden. How about you guys?
Which kind of trees?
Oak, rowan, cherry, and silver birch, because they're some of the hardiest trees that will survive up here. We get 90-mile-an-hour winds up here, freezing cold. So we have to have hardy trees. We also have Norwegian spruce. We also have Scots pine, but they're not as hardy as you might think. And then just loads of other little ones, but thanks to global warming, it's changing. And now it's
about to improve in Scotland, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be benefiting off the back of something bad, but I mean,
just in case.
This is like Canada, Scotland, and Russia are just yes, global warming.
Yeah, we're all just stood there, just
So that's you're planting your trees. We're doing the podcast. We're all doing our ways in less we're all trying to make a difference in a less aggressive way.
I cannot sit down and not even have a chat about it.
Yeah, I think that
we all stick in our head.
Yeah, that's the important point, is the chatting, and I think that hits the nail on the head, is that what's going on at the moment in the whole world is that everyone's just believing in what they believe without listening to any other side or trying to find a better way. And I think, and in my view, it really does stem vastly from America, because you've got such a partisan regime where you're one or the other, and it's just we've got it quite a lot in the UK, but I wouldn't say we're as extreme. I don't know.
We're a bit more reserved.
People can tell me otherwise. They'll be like, "You guys are dicks."
No, but it's true. It's America's very polarized.
I love the shrug.
But no, it's interesting because we talk about the polarization, but even with the Natalie Pelosi attacker, right? Some news channels were going, he was so far left. He's got a rainbow flag outside his house, Black Lives Matter signs and stuff everywhere. I saw a picture of his house. He was part of a hippie commune, right? Went to a nudist wedding and all this. But then another news channel is saying all this stuff about the guy, right? Wanted to be in a commune, all this super left. Another place is saying, well, he was into right-wing conspiracies. He was into anti-COVID. He didn't believe in the pandemic. He's questioning the 6th of July and all this kind of stuff. It's okay, so you got the person that's so far left and with the characteristics of someone that's so far right. It's they've met up in the middle, and you've got this person that's confused and just acted out violently because what else? You don't know the mental state of mind for someone that's being torn so far each way.
I think that's people just pushing their like simplification of the world. Like as we naturally think, we always simplify people down to a perception, and so even if he did any of those things, he still has the capacity to go off and do something evil. And those things don't necessarily link up to the act itself. It might have influenced it in some way, but it might have not. So I think a good example is Charles Cullen, the most prolific serial killer in New Jersey. I hope I get that right. He was a nurse. He trained as a doctor, trained to become a nurse too, and then apparently 2 months after becoming a nurse, just decided to start killing people. I guess sometimes it's trauma, sometimes it's reliving it, sometimes it's power, sometimes it's just sheer enjoyment. I believe his excuse was mercy. He claimed that he was helping terminally ill patients. What's it called? Terminally ill patients like not suffer.
Kind of euthanasia.
Yeah, but it was disproved because some of his patients were young and weren't terminally ill. So it's kind of
bit contradictory. No, but it's interesting. We're talking about the polarities at the minute. Like it almost feels like going really, really sort of out there. Like the Earth is supposed to swap its polarities, right? It's supposed to north become south at some point, and we're kind of overdue this thing. And it's interesting because the magnetic field is supposed to shift, and you're almost seeing this with the humans, like we're seeing everyone is divided, we're seeing problems break out all over the world. We look at Iran, where they've got like people, the girls in particular are fighting back against wearing the burqas, and then obviously you got the war in Ukraine and that, which we'll come to, but it just seems like everywhere there is disruption, like people are unhappy, and I'm kind of wondering what you think about how we've got to this point. Like, obviously it's a big question, but maybe you have like a little idea of what you think is going on. Do you think it's just a catalyst of a bunch of different things that have set off a chain reaction?
I don't know. It is really hard, and there's so much nuance. And I think to simplify it would be not. It wouldn't be explicitly true anything I said. That's what I'm trying to get out there. I'm just trying to say that this is just my simplest I can get it. I think it's to do with inequality, and I think it's why it's caused all of the unrest around the world is the inequality, not just between you and me, or like groups of people like us and then other groups of people like us. It's on a geopolitical scale, and this inequality has been reinforced over time, and the UK is a main benefactor in reinforcing that. I think this is like the strongest person that's done this is the US, even Iran, right? So they were pushed down by sanctions and other points like this. Even though there was all these talks going in about to try and lift sanctions under the Obama administration, they were still pushed down by economic sanctions and oppressed. So I think that the burqa isn't really related to that. But what I'm saying is unrest usually comes from deprivation and famine or desperation, and people will act out when they get to that point. And I think the US really, I don't think in this point, it was at fault. But I just think on a global scale, the US has been one of the major causes. So if you look at, is it Sierra Leone? Oh, I'm going to say Sierra Leone. No, Somalia. If you look at Somalia, once the leader was gone, there was a power vacuum. This broke down Somalia into warlords and warring tribes, basically, like the groups that define them. The US tried to go in, but then they didn't want their intervention, and they kicked them out. And now it's just a hellhole. And this has been done throughout the recent history. Iraq, Afghanistan. You look at the sanctions placed on Russia since
the
2014.
Vietnam War.
The Vietnam War. Agent Orange still today impacts many lives in Vietnam. Just going back to my point there, the sanctions on Russia since 2014, like that caused their economy to grow at a rate of about 0.3% comparative to the global average of 2.3%. That will have had massive impact on their ability to modernize and uplift themselves, and also impact their like culture civilians. So I think it is this global inequality, but I think there's another piece to it. I think it's no accountability from the people that induce the inequality. And so basically, after the World War II, we had the establishment of the Hague and the Rome Statute. And America tried to duplicate this when they did their Tokyo trials. And in this, it set a new precedent. Obviously, crimes of aggression, it became very topical in the Tokyo trials, but it was actually cited in the Tokyo trials as, are we just doing victor's vengeance? But the case was put forward that no, we weren't. And the Rome Statute came into place. No Westerner after Nazi Germany has been tried for war crimes of any sort after. In the UK, you have Tony Blair escaped war crimes trials, even though there's mass calls for it. The judge said, no, it's not retrospective. So we implemented somewhere around 2001, 2002. But okay, but he did commit war crimes and was presiding over the war after that. So I think when you look on a global scale that this group of people are just like benefiting and you're unequal to them all the time, it's going to cause unrest, it's going to cause problems, it's going to cause governments not to move in the way in a positive light. And I think if we really were truly and honest about it in the West, if we wanted to sort out our problems or the world's problems, then we would hold ourselves to account as well as holding everybody else to account. You can't just be a moral arbiter without actually holding those morals. And it is just the covering up consistently about the things that we do to create and this is propaganda. There's no other word for it, and it's been called that by many institutes, but it is the covering up of mass crimes everywhere. And I think a great example is Nicaragua, and the funding of the Contras, and that was done through the sales of arms to, oh God, I'm going to say Iran, but somebody's going to correct me somewhere. And also the sales of cocaine into black neighborhoods inside of America to deprive them of any power or any chance of like rising up, because as I swear it was a CIA director quoted once, that they thought that the black population was a threat to their control and power in government. And these things just never held to account. Everyone lives their lives and goes on and lives merrily. It's covering up for basically evil acts that affect so many people. And can you imagine how infuriating that is when you're not a Western country and you're looking from over somewhere else? You're like, why are we being called terrorists and killers and like heathens and savages and all this sort of stuff when they're doing that? But why do they get the money? Why don't we?
Hypocritical.
And it is not even about race, it's about classes, like different kind of classes that builds on. You know, even in Europe, not only in America, but in Europe there is some movement, they were landed there and somehow, and everything is like kind of connected with this weird, seems like endless growing of this madness of, you know, not really learn properly how to live anymore or respect each other.
But I think that's on purpose, to be honest. Like, I think it's created this kind of chaos and this mess on purpose. A lot of slaves, when they were freed, went to Colorado, and that's where they started building up this like city. And they were all very much, they didn't want to get in debt because they've been in debt, you know, the slaves. So they were like, fuck debt, we're going to work hard for everything. They got good at trades because they were with their hands. They weren't lazy. Like the white community would, I think they were actually okay with everything that was going on, but the politicians and the Democrats, not the Republicans, the Democrats were the ones pushing anti-black propaganda. And I think the story continued as one black guy, I can't remember his name, he responded to the white propaganda because they were saying how white women were being kidnapped by black guys and all this. But the black guy who ran a newspaper turned around and goes, maybe they just prefer them. That's all he said. They burned down his newspaper, whole shop, and all the black people had to basically evacuate and escape because they were being like hunted. You know, we talk about the polarities, right? We're being divided on purpose to fight between ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think both parties now have resorted to playing race and identity as a card to win a vote. And this was called out by Tulsi Gabbard very recently. I'm a big fan of Tulsi now. Like she's like both parties go for race identity, and it's just splitting everyone. And nothing ever good comes from splitting everyone. Like but the problem is these politicians just want power, and then again they get nothing happens to them. They get no payback.
No
It
punishment.
seems like there is a game on top and there is another game under, you know. There is something going on for real under there, and it's been carried on for ages. You know, like even the black people were there, they lived there and worked there for 100 years, and then they let them free, but
With nothing.
with no land, no money, no possibility, scared because with all this, you know, 100 years of enslavement and pain and abuse, and it's
Also,
insane.
It wasn't that long ago, if we
It
face
wasn't
facts,
that
right?
long ago, but we can see that in other different places around the world. Like there is this controlling and enslavement in some levels.
Well, I think slavery is it's just changed the name, right? It's like we're now debt and tax slaves, kind of. Because if you don't work, you know, you're kind of screwed. You can go onto the dole, but then really, is that enough to live a comfortable life? I don't really think so. I think people that do that out of necessity.
I think an important thing is that is one element, but one thing people don't realize is that we're actually going through one of the biggest periods of slavery in like human history. Modern day slavery is totaling estimates total somewhere over 50 million. It was at one point I believe it was the top, I'm thinking 2017, 2018, of the UK's national risk assessment, or it was second. Then child pornography and child sexual exploitation was second, or something like that. It was like because UK does a national risk assessment, America does a risk assessment. They do it for their anti-financial crime stuff. A good example is after the Bosnia-Serbia war. And this is actually, this had a film made about it, actually. The UN went in as apparent peacekeepers to keep the peace and stop some of the human trafficking and slavery by gangs. But actually, files were leaked to the BBC by a UN investigator who went in to make sure that everything was going right. And it turned out that the UN peacekeepers that they'd sent in had actually started abusing, killing, raping, and also then human trafficking all of these girls. And what happens with these girls is they'll get basically their passport, identification, anything taken away from them. They'll be forced into either sex or some other function, and then they have no chance to escape, and they're kept there by fear and intimidation, not by violence by these gangs. In the UK, they'll bring them in, they'll take their passports away from them, and they'll be made to have sex with people.
Yeah, we saw fairly recently up, I can't remember where it was, the north of England, there was that group of, I can't remember what nationality they were from, but there was a group of men who were basically, like chaining people up, using the girls and that as sex slaves.
That's not human trafficking. That's the Rotherham sex gangs. So that's the Rotherham sex gangs, and it was mainly, not all, men of Pakistani origin, who were basically grooming and sexually molesting and raping, because you can't consent at that age, young white girls. And that was the target. And actually, race is something important in that. Is basically the police wouldn't intervene as strong, or didn't intervene, because they were worried about being labelled racist and the backlash that they would get, or appear racist. So, and that was very topical and interesting, because that case broke at about the time when lots of tensions about race were coming up. I can't remember when it broke, but that's a bit different from human sex trafficking.
I think it's important to talk about Ukraine. Like this podcast is more about like self-growth, but we believe that this is a topic that is affecting everybody, and it's kind of affecting the world, and all the tiny connections that are spread out over the entire globe. It's very relevant, and I think we both agree. You can speak for yourself, but like I feel that it's necessary to say something almost, because like I got lots of friends who they're aware of this, but they don't want to keep bringing it up to each other because they feel like they are bringing the mood down. They're making people sad. But I think in our lifetime, this is one of the biggest things that's happened, other than like 9/11. In the pandemic, this is massive. So I think it's important, because what it can lead to as well. It's like it's bad at the minute, but it could get much worse.
Yeah, 100%. And I think. So you made a good point, and I think it is good to talk about, which is why I think it was good to do this podcast. I think what you've hit on there is really strong, is the societal pressures that we now have on everybody. And I think that comes from the power that we know could happen, where not only will you lose your friends, you could lose your job, or you could lose like your chance to progress, and and all these other things, because we're so interconnected these days. But I don't think it's just about talking about it. I think it's the sheer time and effort it takes to actually research or understand a topic. And I think people really underestimate the exponential growth of the information you have to learn or understand before you can even comprehend a single moment or situation. So, we, as the population grows, the amount of historical events, because everything we do is history, exponentially grows. And then we're trying to pin back this one point to say, oh, nothing happened elsewhere, which is what is happening in Ukraine. People are going, it's unprovoked, it's nothing happened, and why are they doing this? Which is a complete lie. But because people have to put that energy and time in to get all these information sources and actually really delve into it, it becomes a moot point. And people just go with the common narrative. And I think this is really exploited by Western governments. Mainstream medias. And I think this is where, I hate to refer back to it, but Trump was actually onto something when you say fake news, because every single time a crisis has happened, it's always covered up. Look at Afghanistan and Iraq. There was one paper, it was Knight Ridder in America, that reported that it was a lie, that they had weapons of mass destruction. They were faking it all, and it was Dick Cheney and this group of like lackeys basically that just wanted to go and invade. And nobody listened to them, called them crazy. They got smeared. Years later, they were proven correct. Every single other media outlet followed the common narrative. And it like people forget about this, and they say, oh, fake news is just him being fascist or whatever. There's a shred of evidence and truth into what he's saying. Like, how can you trust an organization that is majoritarily owned by people connected to these groups or influenced by these groups? Like, where's the trust these days? They're not independent.
Yeah, and big pharma, the military, all these things, the institutions, the government, they're all big tech. They're all connected because they're all so powerful. They could be competing with each other and doing what they want to do. And I guess kind of Elon Musk in a way is doing this because he's kind of just gone, I'm going to buy Twitter, and disrupting
Not
things.
That guy.
But that guy is fucking crazy.
Massive troll.
Like, for example, as soon as the war in Iraq started, all the prices rise up. Like, everything is like rising. Why we still paying the army. We pay with the taxes. We pay just, I don't know, breathing right now. Everything, like keeping buying all these weapons and stuff to go in a war, go and attack, going killing, going, there is already a lot of money, and as soon as become a popular news, like everything rise again. You know, you have to pay, you have to stay at home, you have to be careful, you have to not, you know, like, be careful with your own shadow. It seems like this is fear of, I don't know, it's just too much. And then when you scrub a little deeper, yeah, there is bad shit going on, but we can fix it, you know, or we can move on. It's a bit hard because the other day I was thinking, yeah, there is a lot of stuff to think at the moment, and if a normal person, even just a friend of mine, that instead of, I don't know, going out and buy a new pair of shoes, and instead like thinking about all this massive tragedy that's keep going under, we gonna yell on the street, like screaming, like, what the fuck? This is literally, what the fuck?
Yeah, I think I feel that there's got a couple of like strong points there, which is like the integration of all of these different monopolies and sectors within power. And one of the things that people don't really talk about is the Bilderberg Group. The Bilderberg Group is a consortium that it's the best unkept secret because it is still a secret. But they meet. It's a consortium of like leaders of business, military generals, people in parliament from around the world, and they meet. And it's nobody knows what's discussed in there. Like it's never published anything. It's Chatham House rules. But all of these really hyper influential people just meet for some reason, and when they do meet, they make sure the whole area is cordoned off. The last time they met, I swear, was in Switzerland, and they cordoned off a kilometre square area. But the Bilderberg Group is just an unofficial thing, and nobody knows what happens inside there. There's been all sorts of rumours. There's been a documentary, I think, that was put out, but still, it just shows that all these people in power are meeting and not telling us what they're discussing and what they're deciding when they have the power to completely change the world. And that should really scare people, that they have to do something behind closed doors. Why are you meeting privately and we can't see? Why are you meeting
what do you got to hide
with CEO of Apple? Why are you, like, what's going on? Like, there's no reason for you guys to all meet, like, unless there's something that we should be worried about. I think that's important. But I think the other thing that needs saying is, in America, that nobody discusses is America's not a democracy. And America is actually a plutocracy, or plutocracy, which basically means capital controls the body politic, which it basically means the more money you have, the more control you have. Harvard did a research paper years ago, and it proved that if you remove the top 1% of earners, so that leaves 99% of the populace in America, and you look at how they if they agree or disagree with a piece of legislation, it has the same chance no matter how much their whole group agrees or disagrees. So let's just say it's a sliding scale. It just has it's flatlined about 33%. That piece of legislation will go through. If you take what happens inside of the 1%, it then becomes more of a linear relationship. The more they want it, the more likely it is to get in. And that just shows you that the people at the top are vastly over influencing anything that the whole majority is saying, which isn't a democracy. But then this leads into their basically legalized corruption system of lobbying. They've got a revolving door of lobbyists that are supposed to like be the mouthpieces to government from business. But there was actually a lobbyist that was recorded one time saying we can just get whatever we want put in. It's basically down to us, not what anyone else says. It's mad. Like, how are these institutions controlling one of the most powerful governments in the world? And these institutions have proven time and again that they don't have the best interests of people in mind.
It does feel very blatant now, like whereas things used to be hidden and they would try and lie and like be like, oh no, it's actually weapons of mass destruction or whatever. Nowadays, it's brazen and they don't really care what the population thinks because it's like, you guys have no power, we're in charge, right? That's the impression I get. When you get things like again, Natalie Pelosi flying over to Taiwan, you know, when China's saying, hey, stay the fuck away, you know, like don't come to Taiwan. Like the tension there is ridiculous. And then America just like swings its fucking dick around and just flies Natalie Pelosi out there. You know what I mean though? And it's just like, if you had any understanding on foreign affairs, you would say, hey, this is a bad idea. We should show respect. We should show respect to China because, okay, maybe we don't see them as equals, but they're still a big population that we need to connect with.
But I think that comes to Western arrogance and ignorance, and it's something I've come quite to terms with myself. Is we see the world from our our side and never see it from anybody else's. We see ourselves as morally incorruptible. We see ourselves as the arbiter for what everybody else should do around the world, and we don't just take it as the fact that we are a culture. We are a group of people that agree on some common values, and we're a group of people that exist in a certain way. That doesn't necessarily mean we're particularly better than another culture, or particularly worse. We should learn that if we actually want diversity and inclusion, that you have to learn to respect cultures. You might not agree with all of it, and maybe you want to help influence or change it, but you can't do that through war and bombing someone. I think, you know, that point you just made there was like just the sheer arrogance of the Biden administration is beyond belief. That they would do that. Why, she's got authority to do that. Like you've got like a potential for a war, and she thinks that that's a good idea. Like
to go talk about chip stocks.
Yeah, it's millions of people's lives, Chinese, African, English, everybody's lives that could get like destroyed just because America thinks it's better than everybody around the world.
We're talking about all the different countries that are involved and accepting of differences in the countries, right? We got BRICS, right? We got Brazil, I think Argentina, India, China, Russia, and they're essentially.
South Africa,
I noticed South Africa. I think you're right. I noticed with Russia previous years how they would go into places like Iran and all these like enemies of America, and how they would do connect up with them and all this. And I was kind of like, I know China and Russia don't see eye to eye. They don't like each other, but they work together because it's like, hey, it's like a symbiotic relationship. We need to accept each other's differences, and we know we're different to you. We don't agree with the same things you agree with, but we accept that you're different. Let's work together in any relationship we can. And this is what I'm kind of seeing, like on the internet or YouTube and like comments and things. And it's like the rest of the world, throughout their differences, is starting to go, hang on a minute, you know what? Like, America and the West is acting with their arrogance, you know? And like every other country, I'm seeing this, like, they're connecting over their hatred for the West, right? And that's a bad reason for them to connect, right? But Europe is in the middle, right? Europe with this war is in the middle of everything. They're kind of trying to stay on the fence, you know? Like, Russia's even offered, after the Nord Stream was destroyed, they offered gas back to Germany, and Germany said, "No, we don't want your gas." But the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, America are all like very in cahoots of everything that's going on. But like, what is actually happening is America is pumping Ukraine full of money, right? To buy.
Let's not move on to that too quickly. By the way, you're running at one topic, and I saw you going there.
Sorry,
but I think it's important just to answer what you're saying, because there's actually something that people should pay attention to. Is so there was an interview that Putin did with NBC, and it was one of his very rare interviews that he does with an American. Is it NBC? It is with a American TV or news anchor or whatever. And in it, you can clearly see the Western bias, where, you know, whatever Putin says, he's either lying or bad. And don't get me wrong, Putin's done some bad shit. Like, I'm not talking about he's a great guy. But one of the points he made was about like Assad and like the ousting of Assad. And I think it was Assad, or was it? Anyway, ousting of dictators. And his point was, everyone talks to me and like, shouldn't we get rid of him? Shouldn't we get rid of him? And his point back was like, well, I keep asking everyone, well, what's the plan afterwards? So what do we do afterwards? And he says, everyone gives me the same answer. We don't know. And he was like, well, why are you planning to like oust someone that you say is bad to give this situation like no direction, and you'll destabilize a country? That's the word. And this has been proven time and time again. America and Britain and Germany and France, the most aggressive nations implementing their will across the world since about the 1950s, I think. And the European countries a bit less than. And all that seems to happen is they oust these people and they leave vacuums of powers, and then they just destabilize all economies. And then they're just like,
Drop
we
the mic.
didn't know. Yeah, we didn't know that was going to happen. Like, well, what the fuck did you think was going to happen? Like any security advisor should be going, right, guys, maybe, just maybe, they're a different culture and they might not buy in to this idea of democracy or rule that we have. Like I've lived in Dubai, and Sheikh Zayed Al Maktoum, I think that's the right way to say it. He's a great leader. Like, for his people, the place is great. They love him, but it's authoritarian technically. You don't see America and UK going after them now, do you? I wonder why.
That dank oil.
Even the system in Russia is completely different. I just kind of discovered that like the other day. We were see that Putin is there because a lot of selecting people,
the oligarchs selected him. He didn't want to be leader. The oligarchs selected him and said, "You're going to be the leader." He's just like, "All right." So you got this. Whereas in
Well, I don't really know all about his accession to power. I know he's ex-KGB. I know he's very competent at what he did, and that's why Medvedev chose him for his successor. I believe it was Medvedev, and yeah, that's how he got into power. But I don't know all about. But I know about the corruptions and stuff like with Gazprom and stuff like that, where they got it like cents on the dollar, just like this oil company, and that's how all these people came to power and got all their money. So the oligarchs were, as far as I understand, were also generated by Putin. Like he just was like, yeah, friend, you get that, you get this oil company. As far as I know, but
I guess the truth is, in the West, we only know what we're told, right? We only know so much about Russia because, again, it's like its own culture, it's its own everything system. So we need to understand that they are different to us, I think let's move into the Ukraine topic basically, because I think we've branched on lots of different aspects around it, but obviously when it all first kicked off, what was your initial impressions? Because I had mine and I did my research, I watched a lot of information and stuff on it, and I had my own view on the topic, but what did you think when the war first kicked off?
I was very ignorant, and I was like, we need to send our troops there. I think I was very vocal about this to protect Ukraine, because I didn't know the topic completely, but my ideology is you should never invade another country. So I just reacted on that ideology, which is what I think everybody is hitting home on, which is don't invade another country, and don't kill people. And that's why they're winning this propaganda war. Like people like I was going, yeah, no, send our army because they need defending, and I'm happy to go and help. Like if this kicks off, like but now, I'm completely like, I don't know where to stand on it. I'm gonna say it now. It's still not fucking right that he's doing it. It's still not right what's happening, and it's still not right that Ukrainians are dying. And it's still not right that he's like the invasion just continues. And now we're at nuclear rhetoric, but I think it is so important to say that to have this view in the media and of our citizens and of the world in the West of we are evangelistic, or the Ukraine's evangelistic, and Russia wasn't provoked and they have no reason to go in, or nobody ever did anything wrong to them and they're just evil, is absolute fucking crap. Sorry, I'm going to say it like that. But
How it is.
it is. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, Maria. What was your?
I think we are structured to see what is right and wrong, what is white and black. So divided, but we have to work in the gray area. See that is a bit like this, but is also a bit like that, but also a bit right, but also a bit dark and weird and complicated through history, through so many years of building, understanding, communicating, fighting. There is a lot of money involved, a lot of corruption, a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of mistakes that is building. That this is the result, I think, from the past crashing in this reality. And that's why all the time when there is a news or something, I'm sit down and I'm thinking and trying to understand and trying to put myself in a position of someone else. I'm trying to put myself in a position of an Ukraine, a guy or a girl or a family, and then a Russian people, none of them wanted, there is something, because I've been lucky to, meet some of those.
We've got friends who are Russians and Ukrainians, and they live together. We party together. We have barbecues together, and one of the brothers, his younger siblings and his mum have had to fly over here as kind of refugees, and it's intense because it's you kind of just don't talk about it because it's such a that maybe they've had enough of it, but also it's a difficult topic because it's we've got friends all over the place. So I think that's why I've kind of taken a more critical look. It's what is actually happening
and
here?
Everybody has a story, through that. There is something, we don't have the full picture. This is the thing, when we are with this technology, internet, and then TV and advertising and all these things, we see just one spectrum, one part of the spectrum. Is not enough. We have to understand more because I think there is a very intense force that been.
Yeah, and I've seen on social media platforms just people just celebrating Russian death, and one person said, "I'm so happy to see Russia is about to fall and China will get obliterated," and I've been shouting against them you cannot glorify death. And I think it's so important to people to realize that the common person in any country is not generally the believer of what the body politic is doing. Right now, I don't agree with his Truss's actions of releasing the banker's cap, and I don't agree with Rishi Sunak. Can I change it? No. This is but then somebody would go, "Oh, you're responsible for that," and I'm like, "What did I do? I was up here planting a tree."
Yeah, but in your own way, you are making a difference. And I think that's where it's important for us all to do what we believe is the right thing. Take responsibility, but also say no. If something you don't agree with, say no and stand by your point. Because I think there's nothing worse than a celebrity or someone that says something and then someone calls them out and goes, "Oh, you said this," and they go, "Oh, I'm sorry for this." It's well, that's what you believed at the time. If for you's changed, it's changed. That's cool, whatever. But at least stand by your own words.
I mean, I would say I'd like people to be able to change, because if you stand by your own words, people will never change. So.
Also, change comes with education, right? You learn more and you get a bigger view of a perspective of what's going on. And this is, again, what's happened for me personally with Russia. I've always been very critical view of everything. And I watched a video and this guy was explaining how the war had been set up for a long time because back in 2014 with Crimea, prior to that, America's got a lot of military missiles and defense in Ukraine, and Ukraine's accepted all this. They changed the government, right? So
that was post 2014.
They had military and stuff. It's the same as the Cold War, where Russia put missiles in Cuba. America didn't like that, right? Whereas America has put missiles in Ukraine on the border of Russia, and Russia doesn't like that. And Russia has said, if you don't like back off, NATO, stop your expansion, we could use Ukraine as like a neutral zone. Yeah, you're gonna push. Go ahead.
You've made a very interesting point, and this is something I wish people talked about more. Is that the Cuban Missile Crisis is a fundamentally like great case to apply to this, right? People always think, and I did, was Russia put these missiles on Cuba and it threatened America, and then America resolve and strength made sure that Russia ran with its tail between its legs. Right, that is absolute crap. That is not what happened, right? So what happened was America put Jupiter 2 missiles in Italy and Turkey. Let's just look where Italy and Turkey are, right? They're literally just over the road. They're nuclear missiles. They planted missiles over from Russia, their apparent sworn enemy. And at that point, it was when Khrushchev met with Castro, and I think it was that also Castro was worried about an invasion by Kennedy. And it was only at that point, Castro had been asking for missiles and weapons before that, and Khrushchev turned it down. Khrushchev said, fine, yeah, the only way we're going to solve this is if we have massive military support for Cuba, and that's when he moved them in. So basically, if you think about that, and Guantanamo's in Cuba as well, so yeah, America had a reason to have military personnel on the site. But basically, Kennedy was like repping up for a invasion and stuff like that, and it wasn't until the UN Security Council, or the leader, it was the UN ambassador, it's like Albie Stevenson, I can't remember the name properly, but he basically advised and wrote to Kennedy about actually we need to negotiate like the removal of the missiles through diplomatic talks, and this should be done through the agreement that we don't invade Cuba, and also the potential for us to remove Jupiter 2 missiles from Turkey and Italy, because it does threaten their national security, and we're just leading to escalation. And one of his famous quotes was, blackmail and intimidation never, diplomacy and peace always, or something along those lines. And I think that's so applicable. But the reason you don't hear about it is Kennedy then agreed and helped edit a piece in the Saturday Evening Post, I believe, where it was called In Time of War or something like that. And it basically just slandered Stevenson, who basically like guided Kennedy and stopped the missile crisis. Like everything that Kennedy did was concurrent to what Stevenson said to do. And they basically slandered him, said he basically just made him look like a dick. And Kennedy helped with that. And basically the line they spun was America stood up against Russian aggression. It was American resolve and democracy and freedom that they got rid of America. But notice, no, actually Russia was trying to help Cuba from getting invaded. No, they were responding to nuclear missiles being put in Europe. No, this escalation was American led. I mean, there's probably more nuance, and I'm probably just simplifying it. Somebody's going to come and say I'm being a twat, but that's what happened. So now we're seeing another round of this again, where America does stuff, and then just goes, oh yeah, no, the other person's doing it, Russia, yeah, them. And now you see the rhetoric from Poland, we want American nuclear missiles in our country. America's just sped up the release of their upgraded B-62-12, I think they're called, nuclear missiles to NATO. Yeah, it's a complete narrative change, but people love that because they now believe that Russia evil, America good, and it's just it's leading us down the darkest path. Because why? The question I always ask is why? Why are you doing it? Why do you need to do it? Why do we need to what do we think? Do we think Russia's just going to go and invade every country around the world? They're not America.
No.
Like, like America's invaded they've invaded like, oh, God knows how many, and they've interfered with a long list of countries' government elections.
We're starting to see America, and like America got pretty fucked by the pandemic. You know, like all countries got screwed by the pandemic, but America, I think, really struggled, and we're seeing obviously the divide with the right and the left. I think we're also seeing the world become multipolar. I think bigger countries now are starting to rise up against, because you look back in history, right? There's always been one country that's kind of been in charge of the world, right? For a period of time. And then another country kind of rises up with tech or whatever, and then they take over. They basically have a war, win the war, take over. Then they're in charge. They print the money. And it's the Ray Dalio. I'm not sure if you've read much of the guy's stuff, but this is the cycle of humanity that's been going since empire basically started, you know? And we're now seeing the decline of America and the rise of, I would say, China and the Asian countries, but even, you know, like in time, Africa has so much resources. If they united, they would be one of the countries leading the world, you know, same as India, right? You've got all of these big countries, and America, to me,
African
is
warlords and leaders are funded and weaponized by the West.
Of course they are. But this is the reaction at the minute. We're seeing America, I believe, is trying to grasp at everything it's got. It's trying to reinforce the fact it's in charge. You know, it doesn't like the fact other countries are saying, hey, you know, like maybe we need to work together in this world. And I don't agree with any country should be in charge. And this is why I'm a big advocate for things like Bitcoin, because it's like you take money away from the country's ability to print it, and essentially like with the dollar, you know, they can print as much as they want, but everywhere else gets more expensive the more they print. So I think the war in Ukraine is their way of making a shitload of money, because they're pumping all of these weapons, which Ukraine doesn't have a choice really. But the issue is Ukraine and their younger generations are going to be paying this debt back forever. You know, there's so many billions of dollars, and like they're trying to kill Russia with using basically, I think it was similar with the Apollo space launch, right? Like they basically made Russia spend a lot of money to compete, but America had more money.
Actually, Russia were vastly ahead of America, and it was actually the amount of money. So what happened was that one of the situations we're in is because of Nixon. So while they were doing the space race and stuff like that and continuing competing with Russia, actually they're in Vietnam War as well, and that's when they removed the gold back. But that then led to the quantitative easing, all of the printing of money, because you don't need to hold the gold in reserve. But the reason that it went off the gold back was because people just looked at America and went, you don't have enough money to fund all that you're doing. Yep. So we're going to pull our gold reserves. France, England, Germany, Russia, China, everyone was just like, no. And that's why they removed the gold back. There is a thing about the more egalitarian a society moves throughout history. You see this, the Greeks and the Romans and stuff like that. The more egalitarian they become, the more likely they are to fall. It's very weird correlation. So I believe I've got that right. Somebody's going to correct me on that one too, but that's what I understand. The more you move towards like an accepting, free, equal, open, like space, I guess, country, the more likely you are to fail. I'm going to have to look this up, because I bet you I'm misquoting that slightly. But that's what I understood.
Do you think there's a fine line? Like I think that maybe, you know, like we've talked about it before, like freedom is something that we take it and then we run with it, and then suddenly we want to be the most free we can be without appreciating kind of where we've come from. And I think this is a problem with humans, because we die too quickly, essentially. Like if we lived longer, we would see, okay, we've been through this, and you know what, it was pretty rough, you know, this kind of like socialism where
I don't think we'd like, because you have no incentive to do anything. Can you imagine you live forever and you just like, wait, do you have an incentive to go and learn that? You could spend 100 years trying to learn maths, and it's like, yeah, I never invented a thing. Like time frames are like they are the pinnacle of invention. Like
But there is the other cultures where, you know, I think they are more connected with nature. So as much as you're working with nature and you know, spread seed and you're growing stuff and you have like a season when you have a little bit just for yourself and your family, and some other season when you have more. So you give it away. And this is, I think, we're missing. Like,
Well,
yeah,
everything's
we
profit.
have a law, but now we have to divide it with us. You know, this is a time that we need to share because it's killing everybody, you know. In Western societies, I don't know, but I've been seeing here in Australia, there is so much abundance that people are getting dumb. Now, having a physical, mental illness, you know, having fucking problems, seriously. And on the other side, there is kids laughing and running with the full belly full of, you know, problem because they don't have enough water or, you know, how crazy is that? You know, we're killing each other anyway.
It's kind of to do with like comparative inequality. So it's, as far as I understand from psychology, it's not about inequality, but generally it's about a comparative inequality, and you get that like this hyper comparative inequality in Western nations where you get billionaires, millionaires, and all this sort of stuff, and then all these people rich, and then you're at the bottom. Technically, we have one of the best standards of living in the world ever in history, right? But because you live in a nation where somebody could buy the most of London, like, and you have comparative inequality between your culture and your groups, that's what drives a lot of depression. Whereas when the societies you're talking about, there's not a lot of comparative inequality. There is some, there's hierarchies, but so that brings me on to your point about freedom and inequality, freedom and like making people more equal. Actually, funnily enough, I said that inequality is probably what's driving most of the problems around the world, but actually inequality is necessary. You need a level, not disturbing levels of inequality. I'm not talking between governments and stuff, but between people, you do need a level of inequality for people for a hierarchy to exist. It's only when those become like we have now, masses of inequality, like, you know, like people are getting much poorer in Western countries because now we love billionaires. That's when it becomes a massive problem. And I think the other point to say is freedom. I think that's a misnomer. And I think in the language, we need to really change that when we say our nations are free, because we're not free. We're relatively free. That's what it should be called. We're relatively free. Like, you're not free. Like the
land of the relatively free.
Well, you are. Like, think about it, right?
They're not all slaves.
No, but like you were relatively free to the person next to you, because for you, if you were 100% free, you could go and kill someone right now, and if you so wanted to, and that would be freedom, because you get the chance to do exactly what you want to do. That's defined as freedom. You get to do it. But we're relatively free because we understand that you doing that takes someone else's freedom. So we put a law in that says no, that's shit. So
so Prince Andrew is free, whereas we're relatively free.
What you mean? Oh God. Jesus Christ.
I understand now. It all makes sense, right?
Yeah.
You have to be royalty or a government, and you can get away with stuff. Or a billionaire. There we go. Right. This is how the world works, people. Like, I hope we're all learning together. You know.
Can't remember what philosopher it was, but it was like somebody said, like, man, the best slave is the one that believes he's free. I can't remember who it was, but it was a quote that sticks with me, that one. We saw
the Nord Stream pipeline destroyed. Who would do that?
I'm pretty convinced it's America. Like 100%. And
why?
Right. So for a couple of reasons in my mind is, and by no way am I saying I've got like access to any.
No, but you can critical think. You can look at stuff.
That's what you think. No. So I think, so if you look at like reports of the American ships going around the area at the period of time, they actually had a helicopter there that's generally not with them. They stationed them somewhere else, I believe. I can't remember the exact station. But that has basically a massive magnet underneath it, which can detect stuff underwater. So it detects metal objects underwater that were flying in patterns. The ship actually ended up mooring or going over the top of where the Nord Stream pipelines were. And then, lo and behold, a couple of days later, it blows up, or a day later, or something like that. And they registered the explosions on the actual Richter scale, like, because it would actually cause a mini earthquake or shockwaves coming through. I think so. They noticed it because of the shockwaves in the earth. But I think, moving on from that, it was the instant condemnation of Russia, which made no sense. Why would Russia blow up its own property, its own revenue source
of income
through Gazprom? Yeah,
Yep.
and why would they do that for no other reason? Because Germany technically really isn't involved in the war, and also you're trying to strengthen those relations. But I don't know, it just makes no sense. Why would you go after that and try and incite a fight with Germany when you're technically that's not what you're trying to do? You're trying to go into Ukraine and save, stop NATO going into Ukraine. You're picking it. Why would you pick that fight or destroy your own? And I think there's an important point to add is that, and not many people pull up, is Al Jazeera published back in 2015 that Gazprom had found a American unmanned underwater vehicle, which is, I think it's called the Sea Fox, and this thing is basically a mine underwater mine sweeper or remover, because basically it goes up to these mines and blows up. It's got loads of explosives in it. They found one sat underneath the Nord Stream 1 pipeline. Now, and only America really has access to that.
I'm pointing fingers, but that seems a bit fishy.
And it's not just that, it's the rhetoric on the Nord Stream pipeline for years has been America hates it. America hates it. They don't want it. You can't do that. You can't have it with Russia, and stuff like that. And I think part of that is their ideological hatred of Russia. But I think part of that is also, the sales of LNG and their gas. They want their energy sector to be the hub. They want them to give it to us and to control us.
They want Europe to be lean on America even more. That they need Europe to need America, basically. Yeah. But what are we going to stick another Nord Stream from America to Europe, or send ships full of fuel across?
That's the ships thing. That's what used to go on, as far as I understand. But I think it's important to note that not only is it that they had this rhetoric that they didn't want Nord Stream, they were going to get rid of it. Nord Stream 2 wasn't fully completed in certain sections because Trump sanctioned its building. They sanctioned companies and other stuff from actually building it and actually providing the resources to build it. So it became something for what reason? And the thing is, so you're sanctioning something that's going to help the economy and the industry of apparently one of your biggest allies, which is Germany. And that is just mental to think about. That then Biden comes out at the start of this war, or if it's we're going to get rid of Nord Stream, basically, is what he's going on about. And it's just
he said it.
I don't know who did it, but I remember the quote. I'm going to misquote it. Something like, if it's not gone, then if it doesn't stop, we're going to stop it, or something like that. And when you look at it, you're thinking to yourself
dude, it's obvious.
It's obvious. But the other part is the investigations. If it was Russia, if it was Sweden, Germany, and Denmark, Sweden finished their investigation ages ago. They said they pulled up pieces of material that point to who it was. They say they know who it was. And if it was Russia, they want to join NATO. You just fucking say it. Well, it doesn't stop you joining NATO if you're on America's side saying.
No. But I mean, if you're blaming America, you say, "Oh, America did that," and you want to join NATO, get the fuck out. You're not in NATO no more, mate. You're on your own against Russia. Yeah, have fun with that. So it's I don't know. I see a lot of it as bullying. It's if you don't do what we say and follow our fucking story or what we say is happening, then you're the enemy. We're going to sanction you. We're not going to bomb you. We're just going to give another country that hates you a load of resources, and then they're going to fuck you up. You know, and that's basically how we do war now, because we don't actually shoot a gun at each other. You know, like we pay someone else to shoot the gun at the person you don't like. Well, I guess that's kind of like been going on forever. But
You mean proxy wars?
Proxy wars. That's it.
That has been a main staple of CIA once they realised that they like contemporary wars or actual wars they just can't win. They haven't won a war
Yeah,
properly.
it's cyber
I don't think they've
and
won a
proxy
war.
wars.
And you can't win a war really these days. Think about it. Like you can't really win a war because you'd have to flatten a country. Like, and nobody would allow you to do that. I think. Like, hopefully. Yeah. So I think it's America, and I think it's like America because now the LNG prices, and if it wasn't, and then what was it? One of the higher ups in America came out and said, "Oh, this Nord Stream pipeline, it represents a great opportunity. A great opportunity."
Oh yeah, guys, like at least give it a week. You know, give it like a minute just to breathe, and then you're like, oh, okay. By the way, we've got loads of oil. It's so obvious.
I just had a flash of like how much money we spend just for something, you know, years, like 15 years ago, like, I don't know, a bottle of, I don't know, wood or something, were cost, even a potato will cost like, I don't know, 1 cent or less than that. And now we spend a little more. Like we spend a lot more for inflation, and
yeah. Well, again, this is like
we're still paying the death of World War One and Two, and other wars around the globe that happened in the past.
Yeah.
And
well, I guess this is one good thing out of the you know, the energy shortage and the inflation and stuff is like people struggle, so they can't afford as much food, or you know, like we're okay, but like some people who are, you know, struggling for day to day.
But even the pandemic.
Yeah, but the pandemic was the start.
The pandemic was like a slap in the face for so many
small businesses.
people. And
We had I think we had the highest level of insolvencies, so businesses going under in the UK this year. I read that the other day, and that is it's absolutely mental. Like how like
family businesses.
like people, like apparently we've got a booming labor market, but all these jobs are going under. So it sounds a little bit like where everybody wants us to get in under the minionship of like big corporations.
Amazon. Yeah.
On the Nord Stream pipeline front, it's very similar to the narrative anyway. And I'm just going to say, like, loads of other greater thinkers know more than me on this, but like Jeffrey Sachs, he's been silenced for his point of view on it. He's great. Everyone should go and listen to him. You know, Joe Rogan's even talked about this and like how mad it is and stuff like that. But it's undeniable that Americans started this. America started this, and I'm not saying that it gives any just like any right for Russia to do what it's doing, but I'm going to point out that in a murder case, right, let's say we just had a person going for trial, they wouldn't just go, well, you put the knife in. they would go, were you an accomplice? Like that guy, he would be like, that guy helped pin him down, but no, you put the knife in. You wouldn't do that. You go, well, no, you pinned him down, so you're an accomplice to murder. Like,
okay, so let's talk about kind of the repercussions of the war starting. I guess, like we talk about the BRICS nations coming together to want to go back on the gold standard, right? And America has stated that they're also, and Trump wanted to go back on the gold standard as well. But the problem is, all the dollars that are around the world, America cannot get hold of enough gold to validate those, right? So this is the other concern for me, is like the longer Europe and the UK, obviously I care about those because it's close to my heart, but like the longer those countries and the other allied nations keep playing along with this like war game America is playing, they are more and more complicit, and therefore the other nations in the world are going to penalize those Western countries. So I think the sooner the countries like the UK...
No, I don't agree. There's no indication particularly that other nations like want to have it out with anyone. Even like everyone talks about
not
China.
have it out, but
What I'm saying is that they want to remove us from the equation. You know, like they're basically going, you know what, we're going to create our own world currency where we're going to trade and do our own thing and like work together. You're not invited.
No, so that's actually okay. So this is kind of like running parallel to the Ukrainian war, but I think it's been building for a long time. And it's something I've talked about in my career a lot, and like been vocal about is like what's called the currency, the base currency flip or base currency change. And what's happening is America in like does what it wants or instills what it sanctions and inflicts its will on other countries because of the dollar. Now, under the Patriot Act, what that did was it made the dollar into basically US soil, US sovereign property, which meant that anyone that transacts, uses, or holds dollars basically has to follow what the US says, because the US has what's like extraterritorial laws. So it means we actually do as well in the UK, but we don't have the base currency that's the pound. We just don't have the power to do that, or I don't think we really would do that, but I don't know. Yeah, so basically the whole world transacts on like the global banking system generally in pounds, and that's done through dollars, and that's generally done through the correspondent banking system. And so what the BRICS nations generally are trying to do is they're sick and tired of taking orders from one country that holds itself morally above them. And I mean, you know, and China doesn't, everyone says China is on the warpath, but okay, maybe not, but I don't think it does. And everything I've read, I don't think it really is trying to become imperialist or take over everything. And all of this that we hear about them is like propaganda, because okay, we've heard about them building land in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and this is illegal, and it's the threat to America's sovereign soil. Okay, then America, why do you have over 12 military bases encircling China, most of them with ballistic missiles pointed straight at it? And we talk about those. A good documentary is The Coming War on China. That's a great documentary to really show the hypocrisy of America, and people they're sick of it. They're sick of it. So one of the ways of like getting rid of America's like will on them is to get rid of the dollar. So they're coming together to create a multipolar instead of a unipolar world. And Putin's talked about this. I think in his 2008 Bucharest speech, with NATO, he talked about it should be a multipolar, not a unipolar world. When the Fed prints all of this money, like loads, because America never generates enough money to really cover its debts and pay debt or pay it off, America just prints more above the last debt, and then basically the Fed they give the money,
the value,
it just goes up. Like, so they give the cash to the government to do with what they want, and then the debt they bundle up into bonds, and then they sell. But one of the biggest buyers for the longest period of time has been China, because China feeds the whole world, and mostly America, with their stuff. And if they kept everything in dollars, which they were receiving for or dollar value they're receiving, it would hyperinflate their economy. So it worked well for them. But now countries are offloading their what's known as dollar treasuries. Russia did this recently. They've actually gone to a partial gold back. I think it's like 20 to 25% of their currency is gold backed. And now China's starting to do it. China's now at the lowest US treasuries that it's been for, I think it's like 20 years, I can't remember. Japan's now the largest holder. But now we're starting to see that offloading, and all that's going to do is going to drive a massive hyperinflation in America. And this is a problem, because that's happening in the background. And we think this war in Ukraine is like this just cause, but actually, in some ways, it could also be America's losing its grip on power, and it's fighting as hard as it can to remain there. It won't, like, anybody on top fights to remain on top. Like that's what's happening, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And we talked earlier about the different countries and like their different kind of regimes or authoritarian like ruling, whatever's going on. But I think it's important for us to look at what we have created in the West, right, with the freedoms we have and stuff, and kind of take it back a bit, but look at how good we actually have it and why people from different countries choose to move and migrate to the Western world. Like, we have good values, we have lots of good things that make us a desirable place to live for a lot of countries. I know you're shaking your head, but like, this to me is...
It's not an absolute,
like, it's not an absolute,
of course, but I think this is one of the ways is we need to look and say, hey, okay, there's all these different regimes, and like, this is me thinking longer term, but you know, all these different ways of ruling, you know, they're not really working either. You know, they're having their own troubles with a lot of things, and like even like Iran, I use it as an example again, but they're having their own internal quarrels, and then they look outwards to go, okay, who does this better, you know? And I think what we really need to do in the West is kind of move back and believe in our values and what we initially, you know, what made us good in the first place, and we need to live by it and set an example for other nations and that, to say, okay, you know what, these guys, they got this shit together, basically. Like, what they're doing is working, and then they'll just follow suit, however long that takes. But you force in your views, like you force in your way of life on a different country, doesn't work.
I think because there is a disconnection completely, like creating a new story and then like cover all the bad story that happened in the past, but this is make you dysfunction. Like, we are, I think, a society that has a good values and like good stuff and provides, and you know, power, working together and everything, but there is no, we lost the core, you know, we lost the sense of doing things. You know, we
instead of just making money,
not like we created a tool to create a better future, but we don't have, we lost the philosophy, I don't know, the sense, the core, the understanding, what we are, what is the purpose down there? Like, why we all stick together to do what? Like, you know, why we building all these things?
What's our guiding values, basically?
We have so much power, so much money, so much energy, especially I see even guys, you know, and I think the perception of reality that especially guys that are not, seems like the society is not call them to really use them power. It's just, oh, you're there to build another house. You're there to...
The muscle.
Yeah, you're physically powerful, and then we're going to use you just like this.
But to quote Jeffrey Sachs, I think, like, if we're going to try and be an example, put our morals on others, then we have to sort ourselves out at home. And this comes back to what I said to you before, is that the West operates with impunity. We've got war criminals that just get away with it, get loads of money, and just still stay in power, like, or influence around the world, and nothing happens. But then we stand there, and we've got Biden, Liz Truss, we've got everyone is shouting from the rooftops that, oh, Putin's a war criminal. Like, can you imagine how fucking infuriating that is? Just like, I wish Westerners would put themselves in another country's shoes and look at what it would feel like for you if they were if that was happening. Like, you would be well pissed. You mean, like, you just would. Like,
frustrated.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, and I think this brings us on to the point of, you know, what's happening in Ukraine right now and the provocation that the US did. And so let's just give this an example, right? So this started out off mostly, and I'm really going to simplify this from my perspective, and there's probably stuff I don't know, so I'm just saying that this is what I've understood, is that basically the Euromaidan happened, and this came on the back of loads of like hate, basically, for Yanukovych, mostly fair. Yeah, I get it. Like, he was corrupt, he did bad things. Like, yeah, not a great person. I wouldn't want him to be my leader, but he was democratically elected. There was the biggest amount of international observers for when Yanukovych got elected, and their result was it was reasonably fair and free. And that's probably one of the best results you could get for like Ukraine at that point. So he was the legal prime minister at that point, right? Some of this hate started back in 2012 when he brought in or forced through Parliament a piece of legislation where basically minority speaking zones, because Ukraine's very complex because it's made up of loads of different cultures and different languages, but that's what's happened in the Donbass area. You've got loads of Russian speakers. So this basically said that these people that in those the zones, but they focused on the Russian thing when the outrage came, can speak Russian in government buildings and politics and stuff like that. So this started a big load of marches. Nothing really came of it, but actually no, there's a big punch up in Parliament. But anyway, going to the Maidan, it was basically because they were going to go. He promised when he got elected to join the EU. When it got to the point of signing the document to get into the EU, he cancelled and he went with a deal with Putin. And Putin gave him like 15 million to bail out his economy and cheaper gas prices, I believe. I don't know at all. And then the Maidan started, and this happened over a period of time. And basically mass protests, mostly by younger Ukrainians who wanted to be in the EU. I think Yanukovych brought in like the police, and they started getting like violent to some degree and like police brutality. But I believe the thing that really kicked it off was Svoboda, and Svoboda is basically a ultra-nationalist far-right party in Ukraine who, well, this is what I understand. There's contradicting stories here, but I understand that they were responsible for shooting 100 people in the Maidan, which is what everyone remembers it. And then basically Yanukovych fled for his life. The legal president or prime minister fled for his life to Russia because of this happening. And the people that took power, the people that stormed the place, was mostly ultra-nationalists. It was mostly Svoboda. And these people came from pro-Nazi right-wing groups that turned into Svoboda. They were actually called the Social Nationalist Party before Svoboda. The National Defense and Security Secretary was one of their leaders. He was the founder of the previous pro-Nazi party. And he took office as that person. That you can imagine this big country, they've just put, and mostly it was occupied by people from the far right parties and Svoboda. They were ultra nationalist Ukrainians. So when people say there was nothing to do with Nazism there, I don't think it's a justification by Russia when they've got Nazi problems as well. It just isn't. It
seems like fucking everywhere has them. Like you can't. They're like cockroaches.
But these people are still in power. These people are still at the top. And but the thing that really isn't talked about is America meddled in this. So there was a release of Victoria Nuland, the same Victoria Nuland that is currently the Undersecretary for Foreign Affairs for Biden. She was on a phone call talking about who they wanted in power next and how they're going to sort out to get that person in power, because they want basically a pro-EU and pro-American, pro-NATO person in power. And so they basically orchestrated that. They helped, they supported them very visibly by Victoria Nuland was handing out cookies in the Maidan. Basically, they were handing out cookies and support to the protesters that wanted to overthrow the legal president. And then even John McCain, like previous presidential candidate running against Obama, went there, had dinner with like the leaders of basically this riot, and basically that was like Svoboda's like leader he sat next to. So he sat next to ultra nationalists far right and like supported them and said how we support the Maidan and like how we want Ukraine to be free and democratic. Well, mate, if you want it to be free and democratic, don't fucking meddle. Like I tell you what, like let the actual government oust the like president. Let them. He should have been impeached and then removed. If he was so bad, then that should have happened. But that's like what happened there that they call the revolution of freedom or whatever it is. It was a coup. And then an illegal president came in, which caused caused a lot of the problems from the Russian communities. Because the immediate thing that happened was they got rid of this law that said they could speak Russian in most of the government bodies, and it basically became an anti-Russian, because that's what Svoboda does as well. They're anti-Russian. They were in power. Basically, America supported and orchestrated a coup in Ukraine and ousted the legal president. The Donbass wars rage. Sanctions are placed by the Obama administration, the same Obama administration where the vice president came and supported the Maidan coup and basically was the front man on it. They even say in the actual tapes that were leaked by Victoria Nuland, oh yeah, we need to get someone that's very international facing to come in and give a big attaboy to really solidify it before Russia can undermine the new government. And I'm like, and that was Biden, after the so you've got this situation basically that escalated because of that. But this comes off the back of certain things, like in 2008 George Bush was saying about he wants to push Georgia and Ukraine into NATO, and Germany and France protested at that time. Germany and France basically no. We said that's just going to provoke Russia. Why would we do that? So they were barring it for a long period of time. Funny, now they might say yes. But there's a point to be said here that why that's so important is that when Zelensky comes in, he came in and did interviews where he was saying we're going to go sort that out over there, and he was very pro NATO. And over there he meant the Donbass. He's very pro NATO. He's very anti-Russian. Can you imagine that you are sat there with an organization that was developed to basically fight you, coming straight to your borders, and not only to your borders, they're coming to the Black Sea. The Black Sea is historically the place where everyone tried to overtake Russia. It was the weakest point for them, because if you don't have it, you basically you don't have access to a deep sea port and all this sort of stuff. America was basically fucking over Russia with this move. They could have just said no, we're not going to do it. But what's it good? I think a very good important thing is when Putin said, we're sick of this because Gorbachev was promised at the fall of the USSR. He was promised that there was not 1 inch, not 1 inch east, basically meaning all the former Soviet blocs would not jump into NATO. No matter what, they would not join it. Every single president since the Clinton administration, I think the George Bush Senior administration, just advanced it. They didn't give a fuck. Go to the National Security Archive, run by Georgetown State University in America. Not Georgetown State, Georgetown University in America. They run it, and it has all of the documents that basically everyone says not 1 inch east, or provides assurances they're not going to move, and they did. So to say that Russia's never been provoked into this, Russia's been very, very calm. Because if you imagine it the other way around, if they were doing it to US or UK, can you imagine what the reaction would be?
Sounds psychotic, it's like the reaction, they don't have long understanding of the consequences of what is going on. And
I think it's done on purpose.
I'm also concerned, European Union, they moving somewhere, they doing something. We are watching the situation, or we are trying.
I think they're trying not to make anything worse. They're just staying quiet in the middle and not digging any deeper holes like America's doing, because America's so invested with this now, they cannot back out. They cannot turn around and go, oh, actually, guys, maybe we were wrong, maybe we were partially to blame. They're never gonna do that, A, for their ego, but also it's just, like I said, they're too invested. So how is this gonna play out? We need
You could go
we
over
need
and
to
negotiate
speak,
there.
we
You
need-
talk well.
I speak good. So we need diplomacy. No, but that's because they're not. They like the politicians were just walking out of the meetings instead
Now,
of.
in Buddhism, we have to.
No, so my question to you is why should Putin listen to anything that Biden says? Biden was the front man that helped the coup in the Ukraine. Why should he even take any assurance? Why should anyone take any assurance that the West says? Like, we talk about diplomacy, and yes, we need to make a step forward and things need to change. But the problem is we've lost all of our credit. And the thing is, now you're seeing that Zelensky, who, by the way, I just want to note, under the European Human Rights Commission, multiple times in their reports, go and read it, has been shown for running basically an authoritarian, oppressive regime and committing loads of human rights offences. And basically everyone's like, Zelensky, great guy.
Well, I mean, he's selected for a reason, right?
But he's now going like, there's no peace talks. I'm sorry, but I don't get this. Why is it that my country, who's supporting you, is now not getting the option of peace? Why is it that we're now marching towards something because you won't do peace? Like the Minsk 1 and 2 agreements were put in place and they were negotiated in conjunction with Germany and I can't remember, France, I think. Nothing happened. Donbass still ended up a war zone, a hellhole, and a humanitarian crisis. The problem is at this point is like I don't know whether diplomacy with American intervention will work.
We see in the governments, like internally, they're going nuts. Like they're going on the other side and then on further the other side. Like we have to collaborate and two like polarities is not.
We need to listen to each other.
Yeah, we have to calm the fuck down. I know it's hard. There is a lot of going on, but we have to calm down and trying to talk with each other because I think both sides has them right. Yeah, they shout into each other, but they has them right. Where we have to listen to those polarities and really come together instead of, oh, you did this or you did that, and put ourselves on the corner and just finding somebody to blame in this whole scenario.
Instead of taking the responsibility as well of like, okay, maybe we are partially to blame as well for like instigating some of this, you know? It's like Russia's never going to apologize.
I don't know. I think it might do if like we were ready to come to the table and be like, yeah, we were part of this too. I'm not sure. I just think that I don't think that's completely true. I think they would be open to saying, yeah, we were wrong if we were too. But imagine you're them and you're getting told off when somebody else is sitting there that caused the problem in the first place, laughing their head all the way to the bank. Nobody's by it. Do you know why? Right. Do you know United States isn't even part of the Rome Statute? They're not even part of the International Crimes Committee. So the International Crimes Committee is the one that they use to punish people for war crimes. They're not part of it. But Obama managed to negotiate such a friendly relationship that they're observers. So they input into it, but it means that under the statute, you can't go in and prosecute a single one of their people. How is this madness going on? Like, how can we live in a world where we've got an International Crimes Committee and the apparent moral arbiter of the world is sitting there and nobody can go after their people? I'm going to get assassinated so quickly.
You stay in Scotland, man. Keep planting the trees. They won't find you. You'll be like James Bond with your DB9, you know?
No. We're going to protect you. I don't know how. We're going to all be on the other side soon.
It's difficult. It's difficult because it's like none of us really know how this thing's going to pan out. But I just think, again, we need to just stay true to like what we believe and like.
But this is what we see right now. There is a lot of people with those knowledge and they're rising up.
They're starting to speak out.
In the past, because we didn't have the power of internet and connection, there were just one or two rising up and they were shooting been shot.
Yeah.
You
Now
know,
there's too many people to kill.
Now,
There's too
now
many.
it's too many, and that's why we have to keep, come on, guys. Like if we are stick together, they cannot kill all at once.
Yeah.
There's not.
It's a numbers game.
Happen.
We talk about the internet and the technology and the fact that I think now the difference, like Maria said, is that everything is visible. Unless a country has its own internet where it switches itself off to the rest of the world, everyone can kind of see what's going on. And there's videos from both sides. There's propaganda, but there's also real video content that if you have a critical eye and you can look at it and go, actually, you know what? Like, I need to make my own decision up on this. I need to not follow what I'm being told by all these different things. I need to do my own research and see what the outcome is and what I believe is happening. Because,
and go outside and talk with each other and discuss what's going on, and you're gonna find the truth.
Today, propaganda is vastly easier to do, vastly easier than it ever was in human history, because we think access gives us knowledge, but it doesn't equal knowledge. Because we've got people just getting clips and tidbits on Facebook and Instagram, and all of this is forming their opinions. But then those same people either aren't willing to go and learn and are already set in their ways, or they don't have time. We're going through a cost of living crisis. People are going in and struggling. They're trying to look after their kids and. So they're trusting whatever's they're seeing because, the truth is, everyone just initially trusts everyone, and that's what they play on.
That's why we are so grateful that we have you, and talk about this.
Also, with the pandemic, I think a lot of people had time to reflect and look at kind of what am I doing with my life? Am I happy with my job? A lot of people started growing things and kind of getting new hobbies and things. And I think this, in a way, was a catalyst. Obviously, we're seeing this outcome, and this year was going to be shit. You had 2 years of, the pandemic, which was shit, but then this was going to suck this year because this is, the aftermath, and everything's, hitting now. All the delays, chip shortages, everything is hit now, and that's why this year it's all come to a head, I'm optimistic that, if we start, if we continue doing the work we're doing, and everyone's continuing to, think about things more, then we're going to start moving in a better direction. And I think we're seeing the change already because, we've talked about, academics and stuff are now speaking out, and it's yeah, you can cancel somebody, but you can't just cancel everybody. There's other platforms that are showing up, like Rumble, where people can now, decentralized platforms.
This is the hardest one for me. I don't know what I think about it because you're right. Mainstream media trust is going down. And trust in alternative media is going up, but is that good? That's the biggest question that stands, because what are the checks and balances for alternative media? We should keep our media sources as varied as possible so that eventually people can find the truth. But the problem is this now move to alternative media, I believe, is the rise of bloody flat earthers.
Yeah. they're your extremists, right?
Mass shooting deniers, and these massive conspiracy theories, they think that Obama's wife, QAnon thinks Obama's wife is a man.
No, but these people are troubled. Everyone's different, and if someone is fed lies and fear constantly, at some point they may break. They may suddenly just start realizing that everything around, they may go psychotic and believe that everything around them is trying to kill them, and then you end up with a guy that attacks Natalie Pelosi's husband. People have a breaking point. We know this with torture and fucking the CIA and FBI and how much a human body can take before it reacts. And we're seeing this kind of mad reaction because these people are lost. You see it, you walk to the pharmacy, you see people with little sachets of sanitizer and masks and gloves and all this shit still.
They could be like me. I mean, I'm not doing that, but they could be like me. My mum, well, now she's clear. My mum had cancer until recently, and she was a vulnerable person, so they could be like that. I think, I get what you're saying though.
But in my point of view, internet is I don't know.
It's a solution.
Is a very port way of everybody present. So in the past, just people that have more money or good family or good whatever, they were capable to be part of the conversation, okay? And now we all go in the same level, you know, and we hear everything. So from the one that lives on the street have a phone. Like the one that has on the street, everybody has a fucking phone and can be connected to the kind of field that call it the internet, okay? This is, and reality, as you see in the full spectrum, is mental. It's mental. That's why we see this craziness. But on the other hand, if you like, you know, like you don't have any problem, you don't follow those bad stuff. You're trying to find the pattern, and it's hard, but we're gonna find the pattern.
Yeah.
And you know, even with blockchain, I think is a cool solution that really stick those data and trying to find
Takes trust out of it.
Yeah, like we have a lot of informations, and we just to open up those information and really you work through the real story that we've been told and reality, the truth, and really work with those things. But as a human, I think we didn't get to a stage of evolution, in real evolution that I see that we can do it and sit down and talk about it. So internet is kind of, I see it as a way to do this faster.
As I stated earlier, was like, we're going through a period of exponential growth of information. You need to learn vastly larger pieces of information to even understand a small piece. And that doesn't help.
It's important to disconnect as well. It's important to take a step back from all the media and stuff you're exploring, and kind of like, I like what you're doing where you're planting trees and that, because you're going out into nature and you're doing something physical with the earth. You know, it's like you're completely detached from the media and the internet and kind of that connection where there's so much noise and there's so many people shouting.
I think that's the key. I think you touched on it, Maria, and how you've said it before, but I think one thing up here I get is silence. Like, and you get like lots of time, like, you know, I have work calls that I miss constantly because missed constantly because sometimes I'd be outside and I forget to take my phone these days. I just don't take it with me everywhere. Like, I leave it somewhere, and it's so freeing, and it's like nice to go and like get dirty and planting trees and doing the garden and lifting stuff and getting like active like that. And I think much better for your soul to do that. You know, and I think that's the thing we really do miss out on, is that we spend our lives inside of this technological world, which can be so helpful. No matter what anyone wants to say, we are animals. Like we have the classification humans and animals, but we're an animal. We are animals, and it's shown that like 10 to 15 minutes a day in nature like drastically reduces your stress. And we've just forgotten all this. Like we need to at least get a balance. Like it, and then like no wonder London's so miserable. It's concrete.
Oh, Lloyd, man, like this has been a pleasure. You know, like it's been so good speaking to you about all these kind of big topics, you know, because it's stuff that like we talk about a lot, and like you and me talk about this, so it's nice to just bring it together a little bit and kind of give this to the world for other people to listen to.
Thank you for watching.
Hope you enjoyed that episode.
Subscribe, thumbs up, share. Thank you.
Brilliant. I recommend it.